Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Bridges to Success webinar. We're very excited to have a presentation from Alicia, the Student Success Center Assistant Director at Stevens College. She's going to be doing a presentation on supporting student success and equity during COVID-19, a Women's College Success Center perspective. After the presentation is done, Alicia and some of her colleagues will be available to answer questions. I'm going to just go on to a little bit of housekeeping. During today's call, if you've been muted upon entry, please don't unmute yourself. This presentation is pre-recorded, but as I just mentioned, the panelists will be available for live questions at the end. If you can enter all of your questions in the chat, we'll make sure to access them there. And then we can forward them on to the participants or to the panelists if they've not been able to see them. And finally, the webinar is being recorded, and we're going to post this and the slides from today on our equity webpage, and that link will be available at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, we are going to get started and look forward to chatting with you all at the end.
Hello, my name is Jerome. Unveiled from the Missouri Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development. Our equity project began a little over a year ago with a vision for addressing inequities and educational disparities for Missouri citizens. The department's desire is to build a careful process for addressing inequities and show our commitment toward equitable outcomes for all Missourians, aligned with our vision to empower every Missourian with the skills and education needed for success. The Building Bridges series is an informative look at how Missouri's colleges, universities, and community organizations are addressing equity. We hope you learn from these shared experiences, and thank you again for joining us.
Good afternoon. I would like to start today's presentation by saying thank you to the Missouri Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development for hosting the Bridges to Success Equity webinar series. I have learned a lot from attending and watching the recordings of other presenters, and I hope all of you will be able to take something away from my presentation today. My name is Alicia, and I am the Student Success Center Assistant Director at Stevens College. And today I will be sharing how we supported student success and equity during COVID-19, specifically through the lens of a Women's College Success Center. And while many of the supports I'm going to share with you today were born out of necessity from the pandemic, they are all practices that promote equity in higher education that we will continue to use when supporting student success here at Stevens. So as an overview, during our time together this afternoon, I will provide you with information first on Stevens College and the Margaret Campbell Student Success Center. Then I will guide us through how our Success Center provided virtual and academic assistance, our efforts to increase the accessibility of the virtual and hybrid classroom, and finally, our coordination of supports for students. Some things will be specific to our campus, but the majority are hopefully ideas that you can implement on your own campus. In closing, I would like to take a moment and share with all of you some of our challenges and where we're open to opportunities for growth. And I would love to hear from my colleagues around the state about what is working well on your campuses and what recommendations or suggestions you might have for us. And finally, myself, along with a few of my amazing colleagues here at Stevens, will be available to answer any questions you might have. During our time together this afternoon, I will provide you with an overview of Stevens College and the Margaret Campbell Student Success Center. Then I will guide you through how our Success Center provided virtual academic assistance, our efforts to increase the accessibility of the virtual and hybrid classroom, and finally, our coordination of supports for students. Some things will be specific to our campus, but the majority are hopefully ideas that you can implement on your own campus. In closing, I would like to take a moment and share with you all some of our challenges and where we're open to opportunities for growth. And I would love to hear from my colleagues around the state about what is working well on your campuses and what recommendations and suggestions you might have for us. And finally, myself, along with a few of my amazing colleagues here at Stevens, will be available to answer any questions you might have. The Stevens College is a unique place where women learn, grow, and lead. Our undergraduate residential students have opportunities for experiential learning in majors such as acting and costume design, digital filmmaking, equestrian studies, theater, health sciences, fashion, biology, education, English and creative writing, psychology, and our newest undergraduate major, the only fully accredited direct entry nursing program in the region. We also offer 4 co-education graduate programs: Master of Education in Counseling, Master of Fine Arts in TV and Screenwriting, Master of Physician Assistant Studies, and our newest 100% online Master of Science in Health Information Management. Our small size allows students to form relationships with each other, faculty, and staff for a well-rounded college experience. While our students ultimately stay for the unique education programs and the connections they have built, many students do tell me they were first drawn to Stevens by our status as the pet-friendliest campus on the planet. Students can bring their cats, dogs, birds, leopard geckos, and other pet friends to campus, or foster a pet through our partnership with a local no-kill shelter. As an academic coach in the Student Success Center, I can tell you that when I'm meeting a student for the first time, a great way to break the ice is always to ask, did you bring a pet? Can you show me some pictures? Even on Zoom, I have gotten a little motion sickness more than once from a student running with their laptop to show me their dog doing something incredibly cute, or chewing on a dog bed, can go either way. So like I just mentioned, one of my roles in the Student Success Center is to provide academic coaching to our students. I work with them on time management strategies, techniques for studying based on course content, and tips on how to communicate effectively with their instructors. The Student Success Center also provides writing and content tutoring from professional tutors, as well as ADA and Section 504 services. And while that's what we've traditionally done at the center, tomorrow will be exactly 1 year since Stevens and many other institutions of higher education changed forever. On March 12th, 2020, our president, Dr. Diane Lynch, sent out the email that beginning Monday, March 16th, we would suspend on-campus class sessions and reconfigure all undergraduate courses to online delivery. As a result, during the last year, our services have changed and expanded to provide a more equitable education to our students, and that's what I'm going to touch on today. Before the pandemic, the Student Success Center operated exclusively in person. Most appointments were scheduled in person, with some via email, and many visits started out just as drop-ins. But once students discover that center staff are warm, friendly, and enthusiastic about supporting Stevens students, they would schedule regular appointments throughout the semester. But going back to this time last year, as we watched reports of colleges around the nation transitioning to online delivery, center staff began proactively preparing to transition the Success Center online as well. This started with modifying our learning management site, our Canvas page, to allow access to all students. Previously, our Canvas page was only available to students in our online health information administration program to submit papers to be reviewed by our professional tutors. Working with our coordinator of instructional support, all students were granted access to submit papers digitally. We provided instructions to all students on how to use this feature, as well as how to schedule Zoom appointments via email. We also provided training for our professional tutors through the Success Center and instructional support on how to use Zoom. Once our tutors had the basic skills, they went above and beyond with innovative teaching styles. Our math and science tutor, Dr. Leah Cresswell, set up 2 web cameras so that students could not only see her, but also the math problem being worked in real time. Our research writing tutor, Tana Long, facilitated group study sessions via Zoom for government and economic students. Next, we encouraged our faculty members to continue to send in early alerts, or identifying those who may be at risk and struggling academically. From there, we were able to reach out to these students with academic supports. Many times, center staff would learn about hardships these students were facing, financially, deteriorating mental health and physical health, and we were able to connect them to the proper resources. Anecdotally, we seem to have fewer no-shows for appointments via Zoom rather than in person. According to some students, being able to receive services from the comfort of their own space made them more likely to keep appointments. And because of this, we will continue to have Zoom as an option to widen our reach and accessibility for all. So in providing academic assistance to our students, we keep track of academically at-risk students through early alerts, midterm alerts, and probationary students, and their persistence throughout the semester, as well as academic standing, with good academic standing being defined as a 2.0 GPA or higher. So here, spring 2020 and fall 2020 represent the 2 semesters that the Student Success Center has operated virtually. In spring of 2020, we see a marked increase in academically at-risk students who persisted and remained in good academic standing. It was during this semester that Stephens College implemented a satisfactory, unsatisfactory grading option for all students in response to the inequities many students faced in shifting to online delivery. Any grade of D- or higher became an S, satisfactory, and received off-course credit. Any grade of F became a U, unsatisfactory, and did not receive course credit. And we feel that this optional grade change was crucial in helping these students successfully complete a challenging semester. This last semester, fall 2020, where the college was delivering courses in a hybrid mode, with some students choosing to take classes in person while others attended virtually, and the Student Success Center still operating 100% online, we can see that about 77% of our academically at-risk students who persisted remained in good academic standing. And there was no satisfactory, unsatisfactory grading option this semester, and academically at-risk students who persist are achieving good academic standing at rates similar to before the pandemic, even with attending Student Success Center appointments completely online. As I mentioned earlier, besides providing academic assistance, the Student Success Center also provides ADA and Section 504 accessibility services to Stephens College students. Before I go on to our next topic on accessibility in the virtual and hybrid classroom, I wanted to share this finding with you all. I'm going to read it because if you're like me, I'm usually just listening to these webinars while I eat my lunch to offset the screen fatigue, which is very real. And I also think it's just really important to hear this said out loud. So according to a recent survey report published by the Student Experience in the Research University, students with disabilities are more likely to experience financial hardships, mental health challenges, and food and housing insecurity because of the coronavirus pandemic. Across the board, students with one or multiple disabilities were more likely to report symptoms of depression and anxiety and lack of adequate food or housing, the report said. Students who selected all the disability types included in the survey were often 2 or 3 times more likely to suffer from these hardships compared to their non-disabled peers. For example, 70% of students with physical, learning, neurodevelopmental, and cognitive disabilities said they were food insecure at some point over the summer, compared with just 21% of students who did not identify any disabilities, the report said. More and more students continue to request and register for accommodations, which is a trend found across college campuses, as reports show that about 20% of undergraduate college students identify as having a disability. As shown in the table on the left, this specific population continues to trend toward utilizing a greater percentage of our Success Center resources than in previous semesters. The number of students registered for accommodations in fall 2020 was the highest yet since the center began serving this population, 15%. Furthermore, we have more students who have disabilities, but for whatever reason do not wish to register for accommodations. And we don't see this trend slowing down as we continue to aim to do our best to serve this population. In the pie graph on the right, you can see a snapshot of the disabilities students identified as having here at Stephens. Maybe just 1 or 2 have what might be categorized as a visible disability. And touching on the previous slide, nearly 45% of our students registered have more than 1 disability. When the college moved to an online learning platform in the spring, many students with ADA accommodations wanted reassurance that they would still be able to access their course accommodations online. Primarily, students were concerned about testing accommodations, but despite their worries, the transition appeared to be seamless, with faculty helping to ensure that testing accommodations were met through our learning management site. In the fall, we created an online submission and reactivation process for those students with disabilities who wish to utilize their accommodations. Student Success Center Director and ADA Coordinator, Sadie Mayer-Strand, provided training to faculty on accessibility features in Zoom, such as instructing students on how to turn on subtitles and live transcripts, how to record Zoom lectures, and using high color contrast in slides. Next, I am going to talk about other ways that we collaborated with our colleagues on campus to support students during the pandemic and beyond. Some of these practices were partnerships, and others were initiatives put into place by some of these offices listed on the screen. And the Student Success Center was there to help in whatever way we could. I am so grateful to Shannon Walls, Title IX Coordinator and Special Assistant to the President, as well as Shashawn Dial, Inaugural Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, for letting me share about the impactful work they have been doing with students. They will also be available at the end of this presentation to answer any questions you might have about their programming. The first program I would like to highlight is the Next Step Initiative. The Next Step Initiative is a collaborative project between the offices of Title IX, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the Center for Career and Professional Development. In the spring of 2020, obviously, we were all impacted by the pandemic, but graduating seniors already going through a major life transition had the added stress of doing so in a worldwide pandemic. One of the assets of our small size is our ability to have personal connections with all of our students. Shannon and Shashawn held one-on-one meetings with each senior to talk about post-graduation goals. They also hosted a series of webinars on applying to graduate school with an emphasis on different graduate programs here at Stevens. Next, the Center for Career and Professional Development held 2 webinars on virtual interview skills, as well as how to stand out in the current job market. And Shannon and Shashawn are interested in continuing this webinar series on graduate programs and career services to seniors in the future. Stevens has 2 organizations on campus for women of color, Black Women Enlightened, and the Student Organization for Latina Students. In addition to students with disabilities, we know that people of color, particularly Black and Brown women, have been especially harmfully impacted by the pandemic. Shashawn and Engagement Office Coordinator Marlena Thompson worked together to facilitate 19 opportunities in 2020 for women of color to connect via Zoom, to have fellowship and solidarity with one another. As an attendee of these meetings, I can personally say how important they are not only for our students, but for faculty and staff to avoid burnout, to form sisterhood bonds with those who can relate to the distinct issues and concerns women of color in higher education face. These meetings have continued virtually into the new year, and I'm sure will increase participation, I know at least in my own case for sure, in Black Women Enlightened and the Student Organization for Latina Students. Many students at Stevens qualify for work-study positions and rely on these funds as their main source of income. When the college moved online in the spring, many students who had work-study positions were reliant on this money more than ever. Shannon and Shashawn worked together to look at these students' major and year to determine what kind of remote work could fit into their future career goals. Some on-campus jobs translated to remote work quite well, such as data entry, while others had to be created. For example, in the Student Success Center, our front desk receptionist student worker was responsible for greeting students, keeping the study areas stocked with pencils and paper, and tidying up around computers. But when we went online, we transitioned our work study student to use Canva to create infographics with online study tips and time management strategies to be sent out to students, as well as designing mailers to be sent to all students to let them know the Student Success Center was still operating virtually and how they could schedule appointments. Some students also worked on research projects for faculty in the School of Health Sciences, while others worked in cooperation with the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Title IX to review and collect resources. In addition to helping our students continue to have access to work-study opportunities, we also wanted to do what we could to help our students continue their journey here at Stevens. It was a natural fit for the Student Success Center to join the Retention Committee, as we have formed many meaningful relationships with students through the work we do. Through a collaborative effort with Academic Affairs, Student Development, and the Equity offices, we identified students who had not registered for the following semester. We went through and saw who knew who. So our conversations were like, oh, they're a soccer player. Let's reach out to coach, can reach out to her. Or, oh, they receive a lot of math tutoring here at the Student Success Center. We can have our math tutor reach out to her. So trying to match each student with the person they had already had communication with. And we reached out with different approaches, starting with that email, like, oh, I was thinking about you, how are things going? And when the student responds, there's a natural transition to let the student, you've noticed they haven't registered yet, and offering what supports you can to see what's going on. And from there, maybe a lot of times, sometimes it's just the student is procrastinating and they need that extra nudge to go ahead and press the register button. But say it was an issue with financial aid, for example. We were able to connect students to our colleagues in other departments. And we really focused on personalization with student equity in mind. For example, instead of just emailing the student with contact information for financial aid and saying, here, email them, I would craft an email to the director of financial aid and CC the student with an introduction like, hi, Alex, my advisee Victoria has this question and wants XYZ information. Victoria, could you share the specific information with Alex? And from there, the student is able to use their voice and advocate for themselves while still knowing they have someone in the background to provide support. And so jumping off from that example of how we offer support to our students, I'm confident in saying that at Stevens, we are experts in personalization and cultivating strong relationships with our students. But that's not to say we're perfect. We're always open to learning in those areas where we have opportunities to grow. For example, as we continue to have students attend classes virtually, what are ways we can increase or even ensure that students have access to reliable internet connectivity and hardware and devices they need for class? Also, how can we best support students who encounter accessibility challenges online, such as content that is compatible with screen readers? And finally, how can we support our faculty in supporting our students? What type of training and tools are most useful? And so I think to sum it up, I really like this stock image here because it represents to me where we're at in higher education right now. We are this little plant growing through this crack in the concrete that is the pandemic. And we were able to make it. It's a nice little green looking plant right there. But it's not enough to just have made it. We need more than just a few roots and leaves. We need more than just to have moved in outdated, unequitable practices to an online platform. We need shoots and secondary root systems where all students have access to relevant and accessible curriculum. And we need to flower. We need a flexible approach to education through universal design for learning, a way to give all students an equitable opportunity to succeed. And with that, I want to thank all of you for listening in today. And I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the following women I have the privilege to work alongside: my supervisor, Sadie Mayer-Strand, Director of the Student Success Center and ADA Coordinator; Shashawn Dial, the inaugural Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion; and Shannon Walls, Title IX Coordinator and Special Assistant to the President. These three women are the epitome of what it means to be a servant leader, and I'm so happy that I get to learn from their wisdom and serve the students at Stevens alongside them. So if anyone has any questions or comments, myself, Sadie, Shannon, and Shashawn are available to take them now. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hello, thank you all very much for staying with us. I'm going to get to this question and answer session. I believe we have representatives from Stevens here to answer the questions. So I will start off by asking, let me see here. See, we don't see any at the moment. I guess I'll start off with a question, really, just for myself. As you move along with this work, I guess, do you think you'll start to produce white papers or anything like that to kind of share with greater community, higher education community here in Missouri about how you are working with disability students with disabilities and other populations? As you said in the video that you consider yourselves very expert at making those relationships with your students. So is there a possibility that you might get into that space in the future? That's for anyone. Shoshana, if any other representatives at Stevens want to answer.
Yeah, I guess I'll answer. I don't know. We haven't really thought about that possibility. Might have just put an idea in that we'll have to discuss. But thank you for giving us the idea.
Yeah.
No problem. No problem.
Definitely an opportunity we'd be open to.
Cool. Cool. We do have a couple other questions. What changes implemented during the pandemic will stay at Stevens after it ends?
For sure, we will continue to offer at the Student Success Center virtual appointments. The students really enjoy being able to just hop on Zoom anytime to get their tutoring and academic coaching. So that's definitely one for sure that I know will stay. Sadie or Shashan, do you have any that you know you would like to keep going on moving forward?
I think the collaboration and the branding of our equity office is post compliance. That we have to do this is related and locally. That our bonds, the way that we do it, so when one of us
I'm sorry, Shashan. Looks like you're breaking up a little bit. I apologize.
sorry. Let me see. No one's in the classroom with me. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. So I'm in the classroom, but no one's here. The students were out at 12:15. But I think our equity offices plus compliance, we will continue to only strengthen those relationships. It's really internal branding. So there's the Office of DEI, the Office of Title IX, and then ADA. So the three of us were all in separate offices. But when working remotely, it started as just touch bases for our own mental health so that we could see each other on Zoom and talk about the services we were providing. But now literally we have branded each other. We have presentations, the 3 R's of equity, so which are rights, reporting, and responsibilities. And when one of us is in a meeting, we're thinking about the other two and purposely saying, you know, how do we make sure that we're advocating for students and we're working collaboratively to make Stevens more equitable. So that will definitely stick and stay.
Awesome. Thank you. And another question, did you try any remote support strategies that you found did not work for your students?
Interesting. I can't think any off the top of my head, but maybe I did that on purpose, forgot. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Sadie or Shashan, can you think of anything we tried that we didn't have too much luck with?
No, I can't. Can you, Shashan? I'm not saying we're excellent at everything here.
Right. I mean, well, I will say that the open houses that we were doing, so part of that Next Step initiative that was Shannon Walls, the Title IX coordinator, and myself, that was only successful once we started the one-on-ones. So when we just sent regular emails to the seniors and said, oh, there's going to be open houses, pop in, have you thought about grad school? There was zero response. And also when we tried to connect students to the Center for Career and Professional Development to say, have you thought about your internship? What are internships looking like in COVID? Zero response. So we did go back, and then when we had the one-on-ones, we would just slide that in and say, so what are your post-Stevens plans? Have you thought about grad school? It's a great plan B. Most of the time you can teach with a master's. That's supplemental income. And then they were like, oh, really? And then that was a pathway towards participation and attendance in the graduate school online. And the same with CCPD, as Alicia shared in her presentation. We realized we have to connect to the person, not the service or the office. So serious equity mindedness. So when we started with career and professional development, at that time, we had 2 colleagues who both names started with E. So my email, I would say, if Sadie was a student, I would say, Sadie, it is my pleasure to introduce you to E Squared, Ellen and Aaron, and they're amazing. And they are in these roles in Pruitt Center for Career and Professional Development. I know in our one-on-one, you mentioned you wanted to connect with alums in this field. Aaron, here's this great, beautiful student who's an equestrian major, who's smart. So those personal email introductions changed the game. But when we just did emails, even with graphics, they wanted no part of it. So you had to do the personal part.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Thank you. What was the most prevalent need that students had due to the pandemic?
I would definitely say mental health resources, reliable internet, getting them hooked up with hotspots and where they could get online at, financial impacts, getting them connected to the CARES grant and other sources of income, definitely.
Yes, and we also had some students who were in very hands-on classes, very interactive classes before they transferred to online. And so there were things like helping students troubleshoot how to access a sewing machine now that they couldn't access the sewing machines on campus from the fashion programs, or they were having trouble accessing software like graphic design software. So we didn't get as many of those, more like the ones Alicia was mentioning with mental health and financial aid needs. But we did also get just troubleshooting questions about how am I going to finish this sewing class without a sewing machine, and then how am I going to get my professor my garment? So, you know, things of that nature.
Yeah, we definitely also on the topic of mental health. So our counseling center was still open during this time and was able to provide telehealth appointments with counselors. But sometimes you would run into issues of students who lived out of state and had to go back home, and those across the lines of how can we find them a healthcare, mental health care provider in their state that could help them. And so that was one of the challenges we faced too.
Great, thank you. How did you communicate to students that they could access help through ADA services, especially for those that have struggled with mental health and may not realize that they can get help in class related to that?
Sadie, I'll let you take that one.
All right. Well, there was some general communication sent out to all of the students about what the counseling center was able to provide while we were operating all virtual and off campus. But also through some of our outreach mechanisms that Alicia was talking about, through our early alert system also, and just students who would reach out to us. We would be able to, if for instance, they didn't get the communication about the counseling center, to help connect them to someone there, and also to help troubleshoot if we, like Alicia was talking about, we ran into some trouble with some states not allowing our students to access telehealth for mental health services because of the laws in that state. And so we would have to try to figure out ways around that. And we weren't always able to come up with a solution, but some of it, I guess to answer the question, some of it was one-on-one communication with the student, helping them get set up with mental health services, and the rest was just general communication out to all students if they were looking for that.
Great, thank you. And I just want to piggyback off of one of the other questions that I saw, one of the issues I saw in the video of providing hardware and software for, technology for your students. How did that process come about? Do you feel like it was successful, that you were able to reach all the people that needed it, or the students that needed it at that time? And just kind of, could you talk through how that all came about and what lessons you learned from that?
I'll chime in on that one. So we took a evolving approach. So one of the first things I did in my role was to research all the cell phone providers. We didn't have one document that had that. So literally the last thing I did sitting in my office on campus was to call and research all the cell phone providers and figure out what they were saying they agreed to, whether it's not cutting your bill off for 30 days, hotspots information. So we put all that together and we sent that to staff, faculty, and students right away. Then the second thing is we did tips for telecommuting or remote work, right? And we talked about everything from ergonomics and trying to get a chair and a space and trying to be very inclusive and knowing everyone doesn't have a spare bedroom that can be an office. It could be a place in the kitchen if you have a kitchen. So we started with those things, which were tangible documents because we were transitioning off campus. I mean, we were still working with IT to figure out who had laptops and whose laptops didn't have video cameras and all of the software for staff and faculty. And then we quickly moved into conversations with senior leadership in terms of what do students need. And so we went through our hierarchy of deans, program chairs, asked them to reach out to students, find out whose needs something, what's missing. Of course, we asked faculty to extend mercy, favor, grace for those first couple of days. And then we started doing updates of just things like, you know, in the beginning, faculty was requiring everybody to put their camera on. And then we started talking about the DEI implications of that and still trying to figure out who needed just software. So, I mean, our IT was incredible. We gave and sent with students that those last couple of days, any equipment that we had on campus. We looked up deals. We did everything that I'm sure you all did as our colleagues as well to do that. But it was always ongoing conversations to make sure that we were assessing what was there. We researched information on the digital divide. So very quickly we were doing, we would run reports and find out which students are self-identified in rural areas, right? Because we knew the digital divide tends to hit urban and rural and not so much suburban. So just continuing to literally research, think, brain share, and find out, okay, how do we find that data in our system? And then how do we get them with it? And the CARES Act was huge because those predefined buckets of resources that were possible, you know, we didn't take a very strict interpretation of that. So textbooks, technology, all that was lumped together for us. So the student said, you know, I have a really old laptop and the software that the digital film faculty want me to download is going to blow up my computer. Then we were like, okay, that sounds like technology. Boom, we hit it, get some care.
Cool. Awesome. Great. Thank you. And can you tell us a little about the Stevens student population? Are most students from out of state?
So we are a women's college. So we're either all women or non-binary identifying people. So we do have a lot of students from Missouri, but we also have a sizable amount of students that come from Florida because of our amazing equestrian program. We also have many alumni in Texas. So we have a lot of legacy students that come from Texas. And we also get quite a lot of students from California because of our amazing theater and acting program. Anywhere else that I'm, oh, okay, thank you, Shashan.
Yeah, those are big spots. We have students from more than 20, right now, more than 20 states.
And at least one international student right now.
And yes, if everybody saw what Shashan put in the chat there, about 60% from Missouri and 40% out of state.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. How did your instructional staff handle grades during the spring of 2020? Did you offer pass, fail grades or letter grades?
Yes, we did offer, it was a choice. So students could choose a pass or fail grade. And those students that maybe have aspirations to get into medical school or law school that felt they needed to choose that letter grade and felt that they were doing okay with their grades, they could choose the option of a letter grade.
Great, thank you. looks like that's all the questions we have at the moment. Just want to really thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your time. This was it was really awesome presentation. Also, the question you answered. You guys are doing good work at Stevens. That's really cool. Thank you so much. So thank you to Sandy, Alicia, and Shashan for being with us. Thank you for joining us for the March version of the equity webinar, and I hope to see you again next month. So everyone have a good day. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.